Well, good morning, First Church. It's good to be with you again today. The summer after I finished the third grade, my parents decided to load me and my three older siblings into our car, this giant boat of a vehicle we had at the time. I think it was a 1977 Ford LTD. It was yellow, had flip lights, 8-track player, and these vinyl seats that would scorch the back of your legs in the hot summer sun. They loaded the whole family in the car, and that summer we hit the open road together. Now the plan was to drive from our home in Iowa and to go east to places that were then unknown to our family, places like Philadelphia and Gettysburg and Hershey, Pennsylvania. To go there and then to swing up to New York City, to stop by the Statue of Liberty, and then to drive home by way of Niagara Falls and Ontario, Canada. So it was an international trip, doubly exciting. Now, this trip, our family had never really done anything like this before, nothing so grand, nothing so ambitious. And so I remember my mom planning for what seemed like months. But to start all of her planning for this big, epic road trip, my mom did what people did in those days to plan trips. My mom wrote off to the fine folks at AAA, the American Automobile Association, and she asked them for a triptych. Now, I know that some of you, maybe you're a little too young to know what a triptych is, so let me explain to you the concept. A triptych is the way that people would plan trips and vacations before the internet, if you can imagine such a time. So the way it would work is that you would call or you would write this organization called AAA. You would tell them where you were going, and then they would mail back to you via the U.S. Postal Service this thick manila envelope, often containing this giant binder or booklet they had made for you, maybe an inch and a half thick. And this booklet, this triptych, would contain all that you would ever want to know, and maybe even more, about your upcoming journey. So your triptych would have turn-by-turn directions for the place you were going. It would have information about toll roads, how much to pay, and maybe how you might avoid them. Then there were recommendations for hotels. Who has the best pool, the continental breakfast, that much coveted AAA discount. And then there was also information in the triptych about side trips you might take, interesting historical sites you might visit, other tourist attractions you might want to see, or places you might want to avoid. But like I said, the triptych told you all that you would ever want to know, all that you could expect, all that you should do, everywhere you should expect to go, all that you could ever want to know, and more for your upcoming journey. I thought about the triptych this week because I thought, wouldn't it be marvelous if there was a triptych for life? Or if not for all of life, wouldn't it be great if there were at least a triptych for this strange season of our lives? Probably goes without saying, but all of us together are traveling through some uncharted territory right now. And I think that maybe one of the things that's just so exhausting about this journey we're all being forced to take together is that none of us really knows what to expect. Right? None of us really knows what might be around the next bend or how long this is all going to last. And so that's exhausting because how are we supposed to make plans? And how are we supposed to make plans for a month from now, or 6 months from now, or even a year from now, when there are so many uncertainties? And what's going to happen with the economy, or my job? Are my kids going to be back in school? Are we going to be allowed to travel to that place we had planned to go this summer as a family? Is it even going to be open? All right, what's going to happen? What should we expect? How long is this all going to last? There's so much that is uncertain right now that I don't know about you, but I just think it'd be so nice, it would be such a relief if there was someone who could just lay it all out for me. If there was someone who could just tell me exactly what to expect, exactly what I should do, exactly where I should go. It would be so nice if there was a triptych for life. Well, if you've ever wanted something similar, I've got, I suppose, both some good news and some bad news for you today. And I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is the Bible says we are all like sheep. We are all like sheep. And the bad news, the bad thing about being a sheep is, if you're a sheep, you don't get a triptych. If you're a sheep, you don't get a map. Actually, if you were a sheep, I don't know how you managed to fold up a map with your little hooves, but never mind that. Seriously, if you're a sheep, you don't get a triptych, you don't get a map, you don't get a detailed plan telling you exactly what's coming next, telling you exactly what you should do or where you should go for the next month, 6 months, year, or even the next day. If you're a sheep, all that information about how the future is going to unfold is simply unavailable to you. That is the bad news. But here's the good news, friends. The good news is, if you're a sheep, it's true you don't get the map or the triptych or the detailed plan. But if you're a sheep, what you do get is a shepherd. I don't know what you picture when you picture a shepherd, but one of the first things that comes to mind for me when I think about shepherds is the National Western Stock Show. It's been a while since I've gone, but when my kids were small, we used to go every January to the stock show, and we'd always make sure to go on the day they were having the sheepdog contest, because that was my favorite thing to watch. Now, if you've never seen a sheepdog contest, I should explain to you how this works. How it works is there's a shepherd of sorts who stands on one end of this giant football-sized arena. And the shepherd just stands there, and then with just a few whoops and whistles, the shepherd guides and directs his sheepdog. And the dog will chase and drive and move the sheep and kind of corral them into this pen at the other end of the arena. Now, I've always been very astounded, very impressed by all that, and if you've ever met one of my dogs, well, you can probably understand why. They're not nearly as well trained as all that. But I bring that up because, actually, when scholars talk about John 10, one of the first things they always point out is that shepherds of Jesus' day didn't operate like that. The shepherds of Jesus' day were different. Because shepherds in Jesus' day, they didn't use dogs to drive their sheep from behind. Instead, shepherds of Jesus' day, they went out ahead of their sheep, and they led them with the sound of their voice. Of course, that's the image that Jesus is picking up on in John 10. In John 10, Jesus says, yes, we're his sheep, but he's our shepherd, and as our shepherd, he calls us all by name. And he calls us by name. He says, hey, Fluffy, hey, Spot, hey, Bill, hey, Sarah. Right? Jesus, the good shepherd, calls his sheep by name, and then he says the sheep know and recognize his voice, and they follow him as he leads them to wherever he wants them to go. I think that's a marvelous image for us at any time, but I think it's an especially wonderful image for us to reflect on in this time. As I've already hinted to you today, this week I've been trying to make some plans for the next 6 months, plans both for my family, but also plans for us as a church. Now, I would love to know what life and ministry are going to look like 6 months from now, or even 3 months, or even 1 month from now. I would love to know that. And I would love to make this really detailed plan, say this is how it's going to be. Of course, I can't do that, because I just don't have all the information I need to make those kinds of decisions. I don't have that. But Jesus says in John 10, what I do have is, well, what you also have. What we have is a shepherd. We have a shepherd who promises to go out ahead of us into all the uncertainties of this day, or this week, this month, or this year. The Good Shepherd goes ahead of us into those places and into that uncertainty, which is just marvelous in itself to think about. I mean, people of God, consider this. Whatever you go through next, whatever strange twists and turns the road might have for you, whatever dark and scary valley you might have to traverse, wherever you might have to go, your good and gracious shepherd goes ahead of you. Because Jesus, the Good Shepherd, has called you by name, and he has claimed you as his own. And now, Jesus, the one who has called you and claimed you, Jesus now invites you to continue to listen for his voice. Right? To listen for his voice each day, and then to put one foot in front of the other, to follow him one step at a time to the pastures, to the places of new and abundant life where he wants to lead you. That's the invitation and the challenge for us today, friends. It's to listen to Jesus' voice and to follow him one step at a time, right, one day at a time, wherever he wants to lead us. So here's the question I want to invite you to sit with today. The question simply is, where is Jesus leading you today? I want to invite you to sit with that question and maybe talk with Jesus about it. Where is Jesus inviting you to follow him today? And I want to emphasize the today part, because I think that's important and maybe something we tend to overlook sometimes. There's a book on the Holy Spirit, writer Francis Chan. He observes that sometimes those of us who are Christians who are serious about following Jesus, he says sometimes we make a simple mistake, but a big mistake. He says sometimes we get so concerned about figuring out God's will for the future that we neglect what God may want for us in the present. Right? Chan says in this book, he says, sometimes we get so concerned about the big things in life. What am I supposed to do for a job and a career? Where am I supposed to go to college? Am I supposed to go there at all? Should we move across the country? Should I get married? Should I stay married? We get so concerned about these big questions, which are important. But we get so concerned about these big questions, he says, that we neglect what might seem like the smaller things. Right? We neglect how Jesus might be asking us to follow him in the present, in this moment, in the little things. This is what Francis Chan writes. He says this. He says, I think a lot of us need to forget about God's will for our lives. We need to forget about it, he says, because God cares more about our response to his leading today, in this moment, or in the next 10 minutes, than about whatever it is we intend to do next year. And he cares more about what we do now or in the next 10 minutes, he says, because God doesn't just want us to follow him someday. God wants us to follow him in this day. Our Good Shepherd wants us to follow him in this day. So how about it, people of God? What might that look like for you today? Is Jesus asking you to make a phone call or write a card today? Is there a relationship that needs some work and attention today? Is there a place where you need to either ask or offer forgiveness, to work towards reconciliation with someone today? Is there a meeting you need to attend? Is there an organization you need to support? Is there a check you need to write today? See, friends, chances are Jesus is not going to give you a triptych for life. He is not going to lay out a 5-year plan for you, detailing for you what you can expect and exactly what's going to happen and how this is all going to turn out and what you need to do in the meantime. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that if you listen carefully, you will be able to hear Jesus' voice calling you, inviting you to take a next step today. So what would that look like for you in your life? And how do you listen for the voice of the Good Shepherd? And then what might it mean for you to step out, to take that next step, and to follow him into the new and abundant life that he wants to give to you today? A week or two ago, a member of First Church named Kaya, she was in the grocery store checkout lane, getting her week's supplies for her and her family. And as she was in the checkout line, she struck up a conversation with a rather frazzled-looking cashier. In that conversation, she asked the simple question that you ask people. She said, how are you doing today? But I think she must have said it in a way that this cashier knew she meant it because, well, the cashier told her. Cashier told her that this whole season it's been really tough for people in her work, but she said that particular day had been especially difficult. She said it had been difficult because she has the unfortunate task of telling customers that it's store policy that there's a limit on certain items that they can buy. So in this particular instance, she had to tell a customer that no, he couldn't buy, I don't know what it was, 12 dozen eggs or 48 rolls of toilet paper or whatever it might have been. She had to deliver that news, and unfortunately, the customer he didn't respond well. Let's just say it that way. Because when he received that news, he kind of flew into a rage, and he hurled a whole gallon of milk at his cashier. Well, when Kaya heard that story, she felt like she just had to do something for that cashier and her coworkers. Or actually, maybe I should say it a little differently. When Kaya heard that story, she felt led by her good and gracious shepherd to take a step, to do something to encourage that cashier and her coworkers. So after she paid for her groceries, everything was all bagged up, Kaya went and she found the store manager, talked about what she might do, what that might look like. Then when she got home, she sent a text to a group of friends in her neighborhood, including a friend who just happens to own a small catering business, a person some of you know named Kim. And together, those women, they came up with a plan. And after just a few days and just working out a few logistics, well, a few days later, they were able to deliver breakfast in the form of 150 individually wrapped breakfast burritos for all of the workers in that local grocery store. Now that's one way one person in our congregation was able to hear and to respond to the leading of the Good Shepherd in her life. But really the question today is what about you? What about you? How can you learn to listen for the voice of the Good Shepherd who continues to call out to you? And what would it mean? What would it mean for you not just to listen, but to step out in faith and to follow him into the abundant life that he has for you today? Friends, like I said, I hope you'll take some time to reflect on that, to pray about that. I hope that you will hear the voice of the Good Shepherd calling you today and in this week, and that you will be empowered by the Spirit to step out in faith and follow him wherever he leads you. Grace and peace to you, dear friends. Have a good week.